This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the DreamPod by Dreamcast Junkyard. You're joining myself, Andrew, along with the lovely Lewis and the wonderful Mike. How are you both?
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, wonderful Mike is an interesting start to my podcast. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy for that title. It's what I don't get called most of the time. It usually starts with a C.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm doing all right as well, Andrew. Yeah. Thanks for the compliment.
It's all right. I need to think of something that begins with. I should have thought of something that begins with M for Mike, because lovely Lewis and magnificent Mike.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, I'll do.
We'll do that. Yeah,
that's my dating app name.
Okay.
Just because my wife's watching this, listening to this, it's not.
I was about to say your wife will be really pleased to hear that.
Please don't knife me in my sleep.
Oh dear, no, please don't, because Mike is a fountain of Dreamcast knowledge, and we don't want to lose that. So,
fountain of blood once she's done with me.
That's true. So, yeah, we're here, and this year, the year 2020, not been the best of years for a lot of reasons.
Why is that, Andrew?
I don't know. I don't know. It just hasn't been great, has it? We've all been stuck at home for a bit. I don't want to go into the deepest, a bit. Don't want to go into the deepest, darkest recesses of 2020 and the horrors that it brought. But we all experienced it. We all know how crap it's been. But one particular highlight of this year is the fact that in the UK and Europe, everywhere apart from Japan, actually, the Dreamcast turned 21 this year. Of course, in America, that meant that it was finally legal for it to drink, but it's been able to do that here for quite some years now. So I thought it'd be interesting to see what the Dreamcast can do at 21 in the UK that it couldn't do before. So just to list a few things that the Dreamcast is old enough to do now. The Dreamcast can drive certain kinds of larger vehicles like lorries or buses. It's now entitled to full national minimum wage. I don't know what job it would have, but we'll come back to that later. It can apply to adopt a child. The Saturn, maybe.
Game Gear Micro.
Game Gear.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Yeah. It can also apply for certain jobs like becoming a driving instructor. It can apply for a license to fly commercial transport airplanes, helicopters, gyroplanes and airships. I like the airships at the end. I thought that was nice. Yeah. What would an airship be these days? Is that just like a balloon or something, I suppose? I'm not sure. And lastly, although it's been legal to drink for a few years here in the UK, it can now enter 21 plus venues, which was always the bane of my existence as a student.
Yes. Yeah.
Way to keep students out of your venues is to make them 21 plus. But my question this time is, now the Dreamcast is 21, it must have a job by now. It's left home, it's been drinking for a while, it's probably learnt some new things. What job would the Dreamcast have if the Dreamcast was working right now?
It would. I don't think Dreamcast would work. I think Dreamcast would be a free spirit. Sleep in wooded areas, just go about its life and living as a free spirit amongst the pollution of modern day society.
Okay.
Probably, probably punching a Tory in the face occasionally, that kind of thing. It's sort of like a nice 21-year-old sort of rebel. Yeah. I don't know. I must have missed that part about what consoles jobs there are. Yeah.
I'm just anthropomorphizing consoles here. We could go through all the Sega consoles if you like, like the SG-1000. What's that doing 30 odd years later,
Yeah. I mean, that's married with children.
Sure.
But I think the Dreamcast is it would have a job to match its spirit as an underrated but dearly beloved console, which is seemingly getting quite a lot of attention this year, which is just today, for instance, on our Twitter feed, we were tagged in a post by one of the followers of Dreamcast Junkyard, Daniel Eckersley. He tagged us in a post from the comedian Mark Watson, who I think some people may know. He's the guy with the Bristolian accent. He has a very poor taste in football teams, but he is from Bristol. And he was wearing a Dreamcast shirt. And there seems to be a lot more of this year. I don't know. It seems like every few weeks or few months at current time, something else comes out when it's Dreamcast is back in the public eye. You know, BBC ran an article about it when it was the anniversary. Obviously the American anniversary, not the actual UK one. But there you go.
It is odd how people kind of look at the American anniversary more than ours, especially places over here. It doesn't really get a look in. It's always the I mean, I guess the 9th of the 9th is a bit of a special, 9999 special date, but we're not in America. It didn't come out there. It didn't come out here then.
Bloody Americans. Bloody Americans.
I think a lot of the retro gaming community online is quite heavily dominated by American creators. That's why you always hear about the Genesis and not the Mega Drive.
As that Netflix series pointed out, I don't think gaming existed in Europe during any other part. I don't know, what was that series called on Netflix? I know at least one of you watched it. I can't remember what it's called.
High Score, was that the one?
Possibly. I don't know. It was so aggressively offensive to me that I forgotten its name.
Okay.
I was thinking of watching it, but then I saw like people, maybe you, Mike, on Twitter, but perhaps just sort of saying how awful it was. Well, not awful, just kind of like, I don't know, like a poor man's retro gaming history, shall we say?
Yeah, it was all right. I think it was an all right series. It's just the fact that I think it missed out a huge amount. We've got Retro Gamer in the UK-based publication, which is, I would probably say, the pinnacle of retro gaming journalism, and it covers the whole world. It doesn't just cover the UK. And I think that when we watch these other programs, the great gaming crash, which everyone stopped playing games, well, it didn't happen. So in this country, so it's a little bit annoying, but I think we're all used to that with American culture being omnipresent in our lives. So it's not that surprising.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, because I think I had an issue of Retro Gamer that had an article all about the American video game crash, and then you turn the page over and there's like a talking about some old Amstrad game that no one's ever heard of. So that was
Darren, because Darren has a particular fondness for the Amstrad, doesn't he?
Shout out to Darren, great guy. I mean, we've got a lot of UK based video game history stuff. Anyway, we've got the Bedroom to Billions series, of course. That's fantastic. I've got the PlayStation Revolution documentary. I've yet to watch it, but I have it. It's ready to go. Very excited to watch that. But that covers the whole world as well. But it's from a British company, British duo who do it, which is great. So it is annoying when you get things from Americans that just look at things from an American perspective. And I know that I got a little bit annoyed personally about how we overlook Australia as well, considering how much we're linked. The Australians and the British are very close friends. So I made sure to put a little bit of something in Dreamcast Year 1 about Australia, because they get completely overlooked, possibly because their gaming scene unfortunately has not been the best over the years. But that in itself is something to talk about.
And their Dreamcast launch was particularly poor, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely horrendous. Yeah, by all accounts, that was probably the worst launch that a console could have had. Demo discs not even available until later. VMU's not available, controllers not available. Just absolutely horrific launch, really.
Did they have the blue PAL game cases in Australia?
I believe they did. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Australian releases are the exact same as UK releases. There's only one that I'm aware of that was only an Australian release, or an Australian version, which was a version of Sydney 2000, which was an Australian version. So it actually had an Australian code, a different code in, possibly commentators. But yeah, everything else, I think most of us will probably have an Australian game in our collection. They're the ones with the Australian age rating sticker on the front. It's I think a lot of them just comes from UK distributors.
Yeah, but it's nice to see a variety of views from different places in the world, not always just America. I'm forgetting how we got here in the first place now and what we were talking about. Jobs, the Dreamcast job. Lewis, any idea about what the Dreamcast would be doing at 21?
I don't know, something like like a Pilates instructor or something.
Oh no, that's okay. The opposite of what I wanted the Dreamcast to be.
I was trying to think of something that someone who would sort of encourage people to come together and sort of for that multiplayer kind of aspect. But no, I'm going to go with what Mike said. He'd be super into he'd be sort of super DIY punk, and their band wouldn't have been super successful, but then everyone was sort of, in retrospect, was thinking actually they were pretty good for their time.
Let's face it. The Dreamcast would be a hipster. The Dreamcast would have a beard. Yeah. It would run a cafe which serves cereal from the 1980s at £5 a bowl. It would have a weird affection for cats. It would wear manga t-shirts. They've never watched or read. Sorry, not watched. It's that kind of thing. And in 10 years' time, it becomes a banker and then becomes a toy. Yeah. I mean, it's just
going back to the dark place.
I am going back to the dark place. The Dreamcast we all love the Dreamcast massively, and it has got its sort of I'd say second coming. That's not quite true, but it definitely has become more of the consciousness of the retro gaming scene in the last couple of years. But I think as well, and we have been very even-handed at the Dreamcast Junkyard. It has got its failings, and it has got its issues. And I just think that if it was a person, the Dreamcast would be a really annoying little bastard.
I love it. Yeah,
I love how disappointed you sounded when Lewis started to talk about what his idea was. You were like proper disappointed dad.
Pilates
no,
instructor.
It's not what I had in mind for my child.
No offense to Pilates instructors out there.
But I thought you said that the Dreamcast is annoying little shit, so surely it would teach Pilates.
Yes, but annoying little shit in terms of sort of, you can see a gem of goodness in it, but it just goes about it the wrong way. Pilates instructors, I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, but I believe a survey was carried out and Pilates instructors are actually demons.
Okay. That famous survey.
Don't quote me on that.
I was going to say that I would imagine the Dreamcast being like an Etsy store seller, like just selling loads of stuff with Dreamcast logos on, because that's what it's become at this point, really. It's
but like fake Dreamcast games.
Yes, selling
reproduction, yeah. Propeller Arena, like with some like really badly photocopied cover or something.
Yeah.
Even worse, you can imagine when it got older, it has the big trench coat, and it goes around the streets opening the trench coat up, and it's just lined with repro Dreamcast games.
Yeah.
Hey, that sounds much like my early 20s. Let's not go too far there. And just to clarify as well, before anyone hears that and think that I did some kind of Columbine massacre type thing, I meant in terms of for the more gothic look. Okay, just sort of get that in there.
Fine. Yeah, I thought people might think Flasher, but sure. Okay. Well, since we're on this kind of topic, Dreamcast is now 21. It's it's come of age, as it were. What's next? What is next for the Dreamcast? We have seen it grow from humble beginnings to utter failure, and then climb back up again to a bit of a cult classic and something that people remember very fondly. And we're here now, where we have games still being produced for it, new pieces of technology being produced for it. It's like you said, Mike, it's had a bit of a renaissance of recent years, more so than usually. The Dreamcast, for however long the Dreamcast Junkyard has been going, has been a popular console amongst a small number. But I've definitely, we've seen that grow much more over recent years. Well, let's discuss where we think the trajectory of the Dreamcast is going to go now, and where we want it to go, more importantly, now that it's kind of come to the point that it's at. The point I would point out as well, that Sega has even started to pay attention to their own console. That's something to be noted, I guess. Mike, I guess what comes to you first. What do you think 2021 holds for the Dreamcast, or what would you like it to hold for the Dreamcast?
Yeah, so as a couple of people on Twitter have pointed out, I was right with my predictions on the last time we were asked to predict things for the future of Sega. So anything I say here now will obviously be wrong, but I think there will almost certainly be a Dreamcast Mini in the next year. I think the tide is turning towards that side. I think there's a lot of talk about Sega doing things now. They're looking at their old brands a lot more. 60th anniversary obviously is going on as we speak. So I think there definitely is the first time ever I've said I think a Dreamcast Mini is in the pipeline, but I think it's inevitable to an extent. But I think for me, aside from that, I think I would like to see more literature. Obviously, Andrew has done a fantastic book, and obviously has Year 2 coming out of Dreamcast of that book. So I think that's fantastic. I think more of that. I think some more literature, some more sort of, I'm going to say grown-up things to do with Dreamcast. After all, it is 21, and I think some reminiscing, which is sort of goes into detail and some things like that, would be fantastic. I also think the indie scene is exploding exponentially. We have 12 games on the horizon within the next 3 months coming out. I think a very, very quick count in my head of games that I know are being released next year. I think another 10 are being released next year already. Not all of those have been announced. There's 22 games in 15 months. I mean, there's not many consoles 21 years of age that can say that.
True.
I just hope, and I'll reiterate what I said in the last time we talked about this on the podcast, I just hope that the quality is there. We don't want the quality to dip and just have games. I suppose we've reached a sort of critical mass now where we don't need to just celebrate every single game coming on Dreamcast. We now are looking for quality. And I think some of the indie developers who are now looking towards Dreamcast versions as being a really cool way of doing physical versions. I know that Josh Fairhurst at Limited Run Games is a big Dreamcast fan.
Yeah.
I have a funny feeling that they might have some Dreamcast games coming out quite soon. I'm not basing that on any kind of fact, just my thinking. I think that would be an interesting little diversion for us to take as well in the future. So I think Sega recognizing the Dreamcast more, I think is going to be a big thing for the next year, and I think that there will be a big, large intake of indie games as well.
Okay. And it's interesting there that you mentioned the quality of the games. So yeah, you're kind of right in the fact that it almost didn't matter what was released up until this point on the Dreamcast. If it was a game, it was kind of a curiosity, and people would be interested enough to buy it. But I guess that's slowing down now, isn't it? It's more to do with, hey, we've got it's Xenocrisis, right? Is the big more recent game that's come out, which people have, it's come out across multiple consoles, not just the Dreamcast, and people have applauded that as being an excellent game, and to the degree that the brand new console, the Evercade, has a version of it along with Tanglewood. Yeah,
there's a lot of really high quality games coming out. There's games that the Junkyard has been aware of for some time that when they do come out, it's going to, I think, blow some people away. So I don't think you can have that shovelware type content anymore. Not saying every indie game has been shovelware. That's 100% not what I'm saying. Before someone attacks me again. But no, it's definitely getting to that stage where I think we have a more discerning palette when it comes to what games we expect to be on Dreamcast. And I think what we can deserve to be on Dreamcast. Some of the Josh Pod games coming out are looking really, really special for me. And Intrepid Izzy looks fantastic. Xenocider. There's going to be a lot of really cool stuff coming out.
Yeah. I think what I thought then, as you say that, so a lot of the indie titles, of course, are very much either 2D or very simplistic 3D titles. Yeah. Do you think going forward, 2021 or beyond is going to be where we start seeing people push the tech a little bit more, or is it possible for them to do that, do you think?
I think it depends on what the developers can do, I suppose, and what they can do within the budget they'll have. I mean, I know people want to see more 3D games, but I think, realistically, none of us make games, and we don't know the difficulties behind it. I think making a 3D game which is actually more complicated than what we've got now, I think would possibly be a little bit pushing a scene which doesn't really have that kind of depth to it. However, I'll say again, I think it's inevitable that Sega will bring out a Dreamcast Mini at some point. Whether that's before or after a Saturn Mini is another matter. But if they were to release a Dreamcast Mini, of course, you then, also have the possibility of previously unreleased games finding their way onto that Mini. So Propeller Arena, for instance. But also, some other cool titles may see the light of day. I think within the 60th anniversary, I know Sega have teased a lot about what they're going to release within the 60th anniversary. Some mini games, they've already released one unreleased game, Golden Axe. One of the Golden Axe remake, was it, on Steam? Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some interesting things like that. That could then drive on some more interest in the Dreamcast. I know we have had numerous occasions on the Junkyard Twitter feed where people have messaged us or they've posted to us saying that they've got this indie game in development and they're thinking about doing a Dreamcast version. It's really exciting times. I think the issue is, to a large extent, is there really that much of a fan base to really get the big 3D, graphically impressive, tech pushing games? I don't think there is. It would be surprising to me. But who knows?
There's the game that Tom has often talked about and bigged up back when it was on Kickstarter, which was In the Line of Fire, which never actually came out. The Kickstarter failed, unfortunately, and the developers dropped it. And that was a big 3D Dreamcast title that was going to be, I think, exclusively Dreamcast. So, at the time, it didn't gain traction. Maybe now it would, or maybe something like that would on Kickstarter. Do we think?
There's a couple more, isn't there? I mean, Slave is still in the process of being released. I mean, I haven't got my refund back from Goat Store yet, so I'm guessing it's still going to be released at some point.
Right.
Hypertension, a couple of other 3D games. But I think again, I think the very nature of 3D games on the Dreamcast, and again, talking from someone who doesn't understand how to make games, it seems to me like 3D gaming is probably slightly harder to develop for. I think there are some interesting development. So one of the friends of the Dreamcast Junkyard, Luke Benstead, I think he's doing a 3D engine for Dreamcast games, which is really interesting. And there's a few other developments like that, which are definitely going to be interesting to watch. But I think there's still life in the old 2D game. I think there's a reason that 2D games are still playable now, and early 3D games possibly aren't quite as playable. 2D games are, by their very nature, timeless, I suppose, to an extent.
Yeah, and obviously it's less of a risk, like, for the developers. Like something like Xenocrisis, that's on Game Pass right now. It's got that kind of retro look to it, so you can play that, and it's like, oh, this is like kind of a nicer looking version of a game you might have had on the Mega Drive or something, so that's obviously less of a risk. Whereas while Xenocider looks bloody awesome, I think obviously we're probably thinking that in the regards to it's a good game on the Dreamcast, but I would unfortunately think it would maybe have a bit of a harder time being ported elsewhere, unless we have kind of a weird sort of renaissance. Like, I don't know if you've seen online, there's like people like Puppet Combo who do these like weird horror games that look like they're on the PS1. That kind of aesthetic is quite appealing to people, I think, because it's one of those aesthetics where it looks a bit, especially for horror, it looks a bit creepy in retrospect. Whereas I don't know if we'd have that with the Dreamcast, because it's one of them consoles where the graphics were good enough. It doesn't have the kind of charm that perhaps PS1 had, with its kind of triangular graphics.
Yep. Yeah. There's no distinct look, is there? There's no distinct look on the Dreamcast. I think that's one of the things. There's no apart from Sega's sort of blue sky aesthetic. I mean, in terms of you can see an N64 game and know it's an N64 game, because it's a blurry mess. Sure. You can see a PlayStation game because of the the copious amounts of fogging and the triangles, and you can see Saturn games because of their very, very poor ability to use 3D. I will take abuse from Saturn Junkyard for that, I'm sure. But you can tell, I think the Dreamcast doesn't have that. Dreamcast was to an extent, it was one of the complaints people use against Dreamcast library now is the fact that there's very, very, very few games that are Dreamcast exclusives. that are left because everything's been ported. Well, yeah, everything's been ported because the games were ahead of their time. And, when it came to the Xbox, GameCube and PS2, the games still looked great. So they were obviously going to be ported. I think the Dreamcast didn't have a distinctive look to an extent. It was just very much the first phase of good-looking games. You know what I mean? It was the quality was enough where it went over that sort of, I'm going to say it went over the uncanny valley. It's not quite like that because you still had sort of weird look to games, but it went over that stage where people thought, oh, it's a game trying 3D, oh, that's cool, but doesn't really look good. And actually to the point where it was just like Crazy Taxi, the quality of Crazy Taxi or Soul Calibur just 3 or 4 years before that would have been impossible for us to think would have existed. However, that was 20 years ago. In my opinion, 3D games, apart from level of detail, the actual game quality is still very close. I mentioned on the Dreamcast Junkyard podcast before that there was such a massive leap between 1994, 95 and 2000. You look at the quality and the difference in games and the speed of development was so rapid. And then from 2000 to 2020, Shenmue, the graphical detail in Shenmue is not that far behind compared to modern games, compared to the graphical quality of Shenmue compared to, for instance, Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country came out 5 years or 6 years before Shenmue. That's a pretty massive development speed. So I think Dreamcast is definitely a victim of its own quality in terms of the fact that it doesn't really have that place of being something, hasn't got a distinct look. And so it's almost about nostalgia for us. We love Jet Set Radio, we love Shenmue, and so those style of games we get really excited by. But actually, that's the game itself. That game could have been on PS2, it could have been on Xbox. It wouldn't have mattered necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. The Dreamcast allowed people to kind of have their own vision in terms of art style, whereas something like the PS1, you were hampered by the limitations of the technology.
Exactly, yeah.
Which Dreamcast didn't have. But I mean, you could. You were talking about the horror games that have the PS1 aesthetic, and A Short Hike is another game that has a very PS1 aesthetic look to it. You could replicate that on a Dreamcast. The Dreamcast is capable of creating, housing a game. Of having a game of that quality on it. So, but it would always be a Dreamcast trying to be another console. It would always be a Dreamcast. Same thing with Xenocrisis. I love Xenocrisis. I've played Xenocrisis on 2 platforms, and my Evercade version's coming very soon. I love Xenocrisis, but it's a Mega Drive game. There's no point saying it's a Dreamcast game because it's not. It's a Mega Drive game on the Dreamcast. Most indie games we've had, with possibly the exception of Arcade Racing Legends and possibly Xenocider, have all been games that could quite easily have been done at the time on lower spec hardware. So I think it's very, very difficult it would have to be a style of game in terms of its content more so than the graphical look, which I think is a compliment to the Dreamcast. I think that's you go back and play Soul Calibur now, looks stunning still. Yeah, really does.
I'd one of the things I'd say is I'd love to see more patches on the Dreamcast, more translation patches. I feel like we're lacking in that regard, I suppose, whereas some systems are just completely just so many games translated now, whereas there's so many games that are just lost on the Dreamcast. Obviously, we've all discussed before that there's ways around that where we can, if we're patient, we can play the games we want to. But yeah, there is definitely we need a few more patches. But the thing is why would they do it on the Dreamcast version when perhaps there's a PC port or a PS2 version that probably more people remember? That's the unfortunate reality with it. But yeah, I'd love to see more of that because I think as well we're talking a lot more about those gems that we missed in the West. So more attention is on them. So yeah, let's get them translated.
Yeah.
I think as well is that going back to something which me and Lewis have spoken about before, visual novels, I think it is quite surprising that there seems to be lots of translated games on the Saturn coming out compared to Dreamcast. I don't think I can think of 3 or 4 translated heavy text, not necessarily visual novels, but heavy text games. And I don't know whether there's, maybe it's a generational thing, maybe there's a lack of appetite. I think with retro gaming, it goes in stages, doesn't it? You know, I mean, when I used to first started collecting retro games back in 2006, 2007, everyone, it was Spectrum, Master System, Mega Drive, Saturn just about, Dreamcast was on the verge. It was always a weird console. The Spectrum had a real heyday in the 2000s, where it was a lot of stuff was coming out for it. I know there's still things coming out now, like the Next and things, or whatever the name of the Spectrum Kickstarter, which actually did succeed and wasn't a scam. A lot of that, there was a lot more of that. Seemed to be a lot more emphasis. If you talked about retro games, you would talk about Manic Miner. Whereas I think it started changing and it went into a little bit more where it was 16-bit games for a while, and then it was PS1 maybe for a little bit, and then I think now we just seem to have a sweet spot now where Dreamcast is in that exact bit where we're just about nostalgic enough that everyone's in their early 40s now, starting to get into early 40s, late 30s, early 40s. Most of the people have settled down now. Most people are starting families now if they were Dreamcast at the time, so it's just about the right time where there's enough disposable income for the nostalgia hit to be done, and also enough interest for it to generate. So I think translation things will definitely come in the next couple of years. And I think it's a very exciting. I mean, there are things that I've heard, and I've heard rumors, and I've heard some people say to me that are quite exciting, Dreamcast wise. But I count on nothing after this year.
Yeah, very true. But no, it would be exciting. I think I'm sure we'll bring this up in another podcast. But the idea of having these Japanese games that are fairly impenetrable at the moment for most people. I mean, I have my copy of Eldorado Gate Volume 1 sat on my shelf that I'll never put in my Dreamcast because there's no point. I can't play it without the guide, of course. I could sit, but I'm not patient enough to sit with a guide. So it's still sealed, but I would love to, because I really would like to play that. And I think the idea of being able to have that translation for it, I just wonder, for me, I guess it's a big time sink for somebody, like a huge, especially the big text heavy games like an Eldorado Gate or like a Sega Gaga or something like that. It's a lot of time and effort for somebody to put in, and it feels like we're at a point now where, yes, some people do this kind of thing as a passion project, but unfortunately, the way the world is and where everything is at the moment, you have to work to support yourself. Your time goes elsewhere, so it'd have to be worth somebody's time in order to do this. So perhaps we're going to see people, or we could see people, perhaps, I don't know, how we saw, I can't remember how they did it. It was like a GoFundMe or just something kind of page to release, was it Heroes of Might and Magic 3? Somebody did like a funding for that. Yeah. Maybe we could see something similar for translation projects where people actually fund them, and so people get a little bit of money, so they're able to spend that time to do them.
I think the thing is, though, with visual novels and with text-heavy games on Dreamcast, is that Dreamcast is a really weird console in terms of its fan base, in terms of the fact that there's only really one, maybe not only one, but 2 or 3 sort of heavy, involved games on Dreamcast. It is that, and again, we've spoken about this on the DreamPod many times. We talked about it before, that it's this weird mix of arcade thrills and just the very starts of the modern gen of games. And I think is the Dreamcast fan base willing to put their time into long RPGs like Eldorado Gate? Eldorado Gate, I played the first 3 Eldorado Gates with a translation guide and Google Translate, and they're good games, great games, but I mean that took a long time, and there's 7 volumes in total. Is there the RPG fan base on the Dreamcast? I mean, there's only 2 or 3 great RPGs on the Dreamcast. If you want great RPGs, the PS1's there.
Sure.
So maybe I don't know if there's that sort of. If you think of the Dreamcast, do you think of long extended text-heavy games, with the exception of Shenmue. Shenmue is the weird exception we have. You think of Crazy Taxi, you think of Space Channel 5, Samba de Amigo.
I mean, like you say, there's stuff like Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio. It's almost a gateway drug. It's what people originally came to the Dreamcast for, what people still come to the Dreamcast for now. But if you're captured by the Dreamcast, if the Dreamcast becomes this, it becomes your go-to console almost, which it does for a lot of people. The Dreamcast consumes them to a degree. Then you're going to want those other experiences, and perhaps that's why you need to encourage people to do it by paying them to do it, to do these translation projects. I would like to see somebody try. I would back. I mean, so yeah, we've talked about all of these games that we might want and indie developers and things like that, but something that's happened quite a lot over the last few years is that there are people who've introduced new hardware to the Dreamcast. So we've had the GDMU, we've had the DC HDMI, we've had Mode, we've had all this stuff that makes the Dreamcast much easier to play on modern televisions, modern setups. We've had things like the DreamPod, which has brought the online back. What do we want to see next? What do we want to see in 2021 from a hardware perspective?
I don't know. I think I would like to see something a bit cheaper for an all-in-one version. A sort of all-in-one ultimate Dreamcast, which doesn't cost the £799 people are asking for on eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Something which links everything together. I love the fact there's all these little independent guys making stuff, which is fantastic. But I just think, and I've always thought that if people in the Dreamcast scene pool their resources and pool their ideas, we'd have some pretty special stuff coming out. So that'd be one thing for me, but also I think maybe some new controllers, not only a standard pad, but I think a new twin stick, some independent twin stick. Sounds a bit odd, but Xenocrisis is probably worth it just to play on twin sticks.
Sure.
Hardware wise, apart from that, I mean, there's nothing really. I think we've got everything. I mean, I can't think of anything we haven't got, to be honest. It's a pretty special time for Dreamcast.
Lewis?
I say this, and obviously feel free to jump in if this is already a thing, and I will then investigate. But there's a colleague of mine at work, and he used to play the Dreamcast, and I just got chatting with him today, and he was sort of reminiscing. He's like, talking about Power Stone, and then like later on in the day, he's like, "Oh, you made me want to play Power Stone again now." So yeah, it was quite a nice conversation to have. But one of the things I said to him was, the Dreamcast is, and this is genuine. I am 100% firm in when I say this. I feel like the Dreamcast is like one of the worst retro consoles to just operate. It's a pain in the arse. I remember having my Dreamcast, and every time something cool was on the horizon, I'm going to play this game, I'm going to do this, something would go wrong. It'd reset. One of the discs wouldn't work. It's a pain in the arse console. I've never known a console like it. I know people complain about the Saturn. My Saturn is beautiful. It works perfectly. I've never had any issues with the lasers. My Dreamcast freezes during Power Stone 1 and Virtua Fighter 3 TB. Why? Who knows? But if anyone could fix these issues, and you know what, even, because I know a lot of people just say, "Oh, get GDMU, get Mode," but actually, I've got all these discs. I want to play them. I want to run Skies of Arcadia through my PAL version, because I don't have the American one, which is expensive now. I want to run that through VGA, and because it can happen. There's apparently a code you can enter into Codebreaker to unlock the VGA mode on the PAL Skies of Arcadia, but the code is like like the biggest code I've ever seen, and I actually sat down and I was trying to enter it in. Are you
sure someone wasn't messing with you? Because I'm pretty sure the VGA mode was taken out of Skies Arcadia, pal.
There's a blog. I will send it to you later, Mike. Apparently, it is actually in there. It's just I'm pretty sure of this. If I'm wrong, I will edit this whole bit out. But yeah.
No, you can't edit it out. We'll just leave it in for your humiliation. No, it's fine. But I mean, would what Mike proposed not fix that, having an all-in-one kind of system that includes all of these different things? I know that there's, and I can't put for the life of me what it's called, but there is something coming that will allow you to play discs as well as have an SD card.
There already is. There already is the CF card. I've got a CF card, Dreamcast CF card reader, which allows me to play discs and stuff on the CF card as well. I mean, that's a great idea. It's a great, I wouldn't have a GD. There's no point in me having one because I've got a few games.
Just a few.
Just a few, yeah.
It's sort of I don't know about you guys, but I felt a little bit not overwhelmed, but a little bit tired of this constant new hardware. And these people are sort of saying they spent £700 on getting an Ultimate Dreamcast. I mean, Christ, to me it just seems a little bit. Every time we get something new released, something else new comes out which improves it.
Yeah.
I just think it needs to be simplified down, because otherwise it becomes this sort of elitist thing where you have to have a certain. We've had this with mode a little bit, where some people now are saying if you haven't got mode, you're not doing it properly. And I mean, I don't care. You play Dreamcast games however you want to. Burn a copy for free, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that as Lewis said, the hardware is. I haven't had as many problems as Lewis, who just seems to be unlucky with his Dreamcast. To be honest with you.
I've only had the one, to be fair, just the one the whole time.
Might be time for a new one.
I mean, I've got, since I started collecting, I've gone through 4 Dreamcasts as my main Dreamcast. And yeah, they are, they've all become a little bit slow at times and things like that. My original Dreamcast, after about a year and a half, just wouldn't play after games, to be honest with you. So I definitely see there is a problem, but replacing that to make it so it's just the basic, a working disk drive, something like that would be more appealing to me. I don't know who it was on the DreamPod who said in the past that they like to play their games as they were intended. I very much feel like that. I don't really have a massive amount of appeal to always playing games off an SD card or a hard drive.
Yeah.
I want to play it originally, so I think there needs to be something. I know they can't make GD-ROM drives. It's going to be slightly cost prohibitive and probably illegal, but I think they could do something and allow us to be able to just use disk drives in our consoles again. Although I would say as well, as I know that there's been some talk on online recently saying that Dreamcasts are, within 5 years all Dreamcasts will be gone and every single Dreamcast disc will have disk rot within 5 years. I mean, I just want to put this statement out now. People stop saying this. I mean, it's just nonsense. Dreamcasts have 20 years left in them if they're kept in good condition, and discs. I don't think I've seen a Dreamcast disc with disk rot. I think anyone actually understands what disk rot actually is. I think it's just a phrase thrown out there sometimes. There's plenty of life left in it. So give us good disk drives.
Yeah, you'd have to treat your disc really badly to get disc rot at this point. I mean, I know it is a thing. I've seen other people show them off, but you would have to treat them so badly. Like if you keep them in the case in like a decently, in a normal home environment, they're not gonna rot. You'd have to keep them in like storage or in your attic or something for them to really go bad.
I've just done an audit I sound like a really, really sad accountant. I've just done a check of all my games because I'm bored most of the time, and I've got 1,470 Dreamcast games, and of those games, only one was unplayable. Only one had enough scratches that it looked like it was clearly, possibly developing an issue. Not a single one had any kind of disk rot. But what did happen is about 100 of the games had quite significant staple rusting on the instruction manual. So it just goes to show that you can keep discs in good condition. And I think there was a little bit of panic, a little bit of sort of War of the Worlds on radio style panic, that people think that you have to suddenly get these GD emus. I say GG emu. Is that how you say it? I mean, that sounds like some kind of weird Rod Hull puppet.
It does.
We could do a whole episode on just debunking Dreamcast rumors.
Yeah, we should do that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
The Skeptic Junkyard. I'm happy for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just to add. Sorry, just to the end of that is, I know there was some kind of mod that I saw online where people were swapping the laser on their Dreamcast for like maybe like a nicer one, but I don't know if that would solve the issues with, for example, like my Power Stone crashing after the 4th level plays through. But yeah,
I think it's still using the same laser, isn't it? I presume it's still using the same. I have literally no idea how it works. I've got to be honest with you. I've got anything above, a pencil is about my technological limit. So,
not to go on another tangent again, Mike, but what was the disc that wouldn't play? Which game was it?
I don't remember. I think it was a Brazilian game.
Okay.
I think it was one of the few games I've got quite recently. I got some Brazilian games. I think might have been one of those, but I knew it was in quite bad condition when I got it. I know one of the games that was quite badly scratched and I thought wasn't going to work, but did, was, as we've said about it already, Power Stone. Had really, really bad a staple rust as well. But yeah, it was. I was quite surprised because a lot of my games came from like chips. Don't know if any of you remember chips. Maybe some of you do. And they were quite. But I mean, that was a time where you could get a Dreamcast game for 50p in chips, and I just buy a big bag full of them and sort of take them home, and then sort of cannibalise the cases over several years. So I'm quite surprised that the condition of them is quite good. But I just think a lot of it's hyperbole and a lot of people panicking about nothing. And also, people are trying to sell these devices to back up stuff. I mean, they're not going to tell you that they're not needed, are they? They're going to tell you they're needed.
I think there's a couple of points there. So the first point is I'm pretty sure that the Segaholic on Twitter, who does the Sega Guys podcast, mentioned to me, because I think I had an issue with Power Stone. I think it's console related. I think there's some variations of the console have issues with certain games. I believe that's the case, because I started playing I played it on my original Dreamcast and it plays perfectly. I got a new Dreamcast, it won't play on it.
That's about lots of stuff, isn't it? I mean, I've literally got V-Rally 2. I've literally got 5 copies of V-Rally 2. I had 4 consoles, and there was just random combinations where one wouldn't work on something. Right. It's. I don't know why no one talks about this more. I feel there's some kind of weird thing going on where I don't understand why some Dreamcasts don't work. I know that some people say it's because of a certain drive manufacturer, but I've never seen any actual proof of this.
I'd love to know that answer though. Like I say, like I've had multiple. I think I've tried 3 copies of Power Stone, one on my Dreamcast, and all of them freeze in exactly the same place. It's like after the 4th level, just bam, stops on the loading screen. Yeah,
I had the exact same thing on V-Rally 2, where it was after the 5th stage of the championship mode. No matter what console I played it on, it froze. The only way I've managed to complete that game is by playing the white label, which completes it. It's bizarre.
So let's get some hardware made to preserve and fix issues like that, because I had to complete Power Stone on the PSP, and that is a bit sacrilege if you ask me. I want to complete it on the Dreamcast.
I completely take into account what you're saying about wanting to play the original games as they were intended, because that's true. I love that as well. I don't have anywhere near as many games as Mike. I probably have like 1% of the games that Mike owns, but I have my collection. I like them. I want to play them. So having a console that's just a GDMU doesn't appeal to me personally. But on top of that, I do want to play games that perhaps are unaffordable now to buy. That I couldn't get, like Project Justice, for instance. And there is to add on top of that as well. Just before we move on to something different, is that preservation is a thing, and although 5 years might be cutting it too short, even 20 years down the line, if Dreamcasts are giving up and discs are actually rotting by that point, you still want to be able to play those games. So preserving things now is a good thing, but perhaps not spreading the misinformation that it's much sooner than we expect, and you should be going all digital. Enjoy games on discs while you still can, but with that thought of preservation in the back of the mind, I guess.
I think as well as it's not necessarily misinformation either. I think I might have come across slightly more aggressive than I actually am, although I am aggressive. I think, just to clarify, I don't think people are doing it deliberately. I think they're doing it maliciously as such. I just think that a little bit with disc rot, so it's a sort of an ongoing thing where people will say they've got disc rot and they haven't got disc rot. It's just different types of damage to a disc rather than disc rot. I think things like that, I think people just panic a little bit. It's we collect these games, we collect these games. We don't want these games to be broken beyond repair.
Sure.
You know, you've bought games to reminisce. You've bought games to have nostalgia. The last thing you want is for that nostalgia to be sort of sitting in a corner rotting away. So there is always going to be something, and people are generally trying to help people, and preservation is really, really important. I just think that there's always the worst case scenario, and you know, you must get this to be able to play games properly. You know, you must get HDMI, DC HDMI to play games properly nowadays. I mean, you don't. VGA, if you TV's got VGA, it still works perfectly well.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, well, there we go. So hardware-wise, that's what we're thinking. And of course, if there is a Dreamcast Mini, it might all be moot anyway, because you could just play all your games on the Dreamcast Mini instead. Sure. So we're fine. But we've gone through a lot. So obviously we're looking for quality things in 2021 then, right? We're looking for better hardware solutions. We're looking for better quality indie games, more in the way of more adult ways to reminisce about the Dreamcast. So perhaps more books, more documentaries. Perhaps we had that very good YouTube documentary. Perhaps something more official along those lines would be nice. And then we had the other day, I don't know what's going to become of it, but we retweeted about it, and it's the DC UK team, or a few of them anyway, who kind of were talking about maybe doing a one-off issue should the Dreamcast Mini come to fruition, or even if not, maybe they'd do a one-off. Something like that would be lovely to see. I think it's for me, that's what I would love to see, because games media journalism back in those days was kind of the height, the pinnacle of games journalism for me, and being able to have a one-off, you know, issue of DC UK where Casper comes back, where Keith Stewart comes back, you know, all the big people from that time, that would be amazing. And that's the kind of grown-up thing, you know, talking about the people who are late 30s, early 40s now, who experienced those magazines as they were coming out on newsagent shelves. Having that in your hands would be almost like the ultimate nostalgia at this point. To have a new magazine from those people would be fantastic. Yeah,
I agree. On that sort of subject, I think media definitely, but also I think the quality of merchandise is also quite a big thing for us. I think we've had a lot of little bits of Dreamcast thing here and there, but I think some really good high quality merchandise, high quality books and media as well. Just more of good quality. Yeah. We've had a bit of a saturation of Dreamcast stuff the last couple of years, but it's like you say, it's been almost because because the Dreamcast being popular, people have gone, oh, Dreamcast, and they just kind of push something out, regardless of quality. Like you said before, of course, there's been games that have been absolutely phenomenal that have come out, but you know, on top of that, there have been not so phenomenal games, not so phenomenal pieces of merchandise that are just capitalizing on the success or the renewed success of the Dreamcast. So yeah, sure. Definitely more quality things. Quality over quantity now is what we're looking for, people who are listening, and more translations of games that we couldn't play before would be great.
And Jet Set Radio on vinyl, the soundtrack, please. Thank you.
Just every Dreamcast game on. Yeah. I mean, did anybody see the Shenmue 2 vinyl from Data Discs?
I certainly have.
I did not order it because it's missing like all of the good tracks. It proper frustrated me. That's not Data Disc's fault. That is because they're just releasing the version that Sega put on, you know, Spotify and all these other places. Right. But yeah, there's so many like decent tracks off. I mean, to be honest, that's the problem with the Shenmue soundtrack in general. The you know, the CD soundtrack is missing all of the I think they call like the free songs, so like the ones that play when he's moving around. Like a lot of those are missing, but it's still cool that it exists. I will add.
Yeah. It is, absolutely. I'd like to see them release a vinyl version of the orchestral soundtrack for one. Yeah, because that's probably the best Shenmue soundtrack I've listened to.
Very good.
Yeah, and it's only available on CD from Japan, right? It's like you can't get it any other way. So
I think there's quite a few vinyls which would be fantastic. You know, I've got the Skies of Arcadia. I've got the Shenmue one. I haven't got an actual vinyl player.
Right.
Well, that's not true. I do have a vinyl player, but I don't have it in my room. But yeah, I think just as again a bit more grown up. You know, I mean, we're sort of in the fine wine and, you know, soft furnishings stage of Dreamcast fandom. We've gone past the sort of high thrills. You know, a little bit too old to skate, but I'm still going to do it before I break my neck. stage. We've gone past that stage. We've now into the sort of mellow out a little bit. Show the kids what Dreamcast is about, and then cry when they look at you in despair and think you're old and past it.
Yeah, then go into your little room, have your pipe slippers, put your Skies of Arcadia vinyl on, and read a nice book about the Dreamcast. Nice and civil.
Exactly.
That's what we want.
Yeah, why not? Why can't we have nice things? And why can't we do this? We can nice, civil, peaceful. The world's going to end in World War III in a couple of years' time anyway. Let's have some peace beforehand.
Very true. Maybe not about World War III, but let's have some nice. We'll see. We'll see. Mike, you've been really good at predicting things. I'm hoping World War III is not one of them.
Can you predict the end of COVID being next week, please? And that'll come true. Yeah, cool.
Oh dear. Just to remind you, we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. What was it that you predicted that came true from the different podcasts again?
I'm not really sure.
I think
it was because the arcade thing. Wasn't it?
That was a pretty stellar prediction, actually. Everyone else was thinking all the other things, and that Mike was there with the money.
I think it was just the realization that we sometimes get blinkered in the West, don't we? I think our podcast actually, Lewis, probably helped that, because when I was doing the visual novel podcast, it became clear that we're talking about an entire genre of games which need no explaining to Japanese audiences, but to Western audiences, there is so much misinterpretation and so much misinformation. Apart from a few people who sort of watch lots of anime, no one really understands what visual novels are. So it was really interesting. So I think from Japanese perspective, it's always important to remember that Sega's a different manufacturer to people outside of the West.
I am now I'm wondering who Anime is and why people are watching her. But
Did I say it as anime? Did I?
This made me giggle. Yeah.
That's my Bristol accent. It's well.
It reminds me of my mother-in-law, who has a very Bristolian accent.
There you go. See. Perfect.
All right, my love.
Yeah. See, that's why we want Mark Watson on. We want the comedian Mark Watson on a podcast.
Yes, let's do it.
It will descend into a football rivalry, but it doesn't matter.
All right. Well, if he's listening, Mark, let's get you on a podcast and have you chat. Do you know what, as well, just to bring up you? So when we did the episode about the Dreamcast Mini, Rob was on, of course, who was on for the first 30 or so episodes of DreamPod. Yeah. And we brought up the subject just kind of on our tangent, as we like to go on tangents all the time at the moment. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, as related to Alt Mag. And I said that how gutted you'd be to not be part of that conversation. Since you're here, I'm going to ask you, what's the best season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, Andrew. That is a question. Oh, is it before they leave high school? After? I think the Glory season is pretty damn good. Mm-hmm. I think season 2. I think there's too many classic episodes in season 2 for me. Any season apart from season 7.
Okay. And you're counting season 6 as a good season?
I don't mind season 6. Season 6 is all right.
Willow's arc isn't great.
I think Willow's arc's all right. I think Willow's arc is interesting. I think season 7 jumped the shark big time. I think season 6 was all right. I think season 5 was probably the pinnacle. It's very difficult for me to explain how amazing Buffy is and how just, I don't know. It was the perfect TV series.
Yeah. And before we move on, because we're not the Buffy podcast, we could be, but we're not.
Hey! I've got a way to tie it back. And I've got a way to tie all this back to Dreamcast.
Good luck.
Xbox Buffy the Vampire Slayer game was actually originally being developed for the Dreamcast. Wow. So there you go. We're tying it all back.
My most wanted game was for someone to find the early build of Buffy on a Dreamcast.
I didn't even know that was a thing. That was amazing.
Wow. Yeah, it's their screenshots in. I've got. I can't remember what magazine it is now. One of the magazines, probably Dreamcast magazine in the UK, had some early screenshots of the game. Presumably, it was the Dreamcast version and not a PS2 version or Xbox version. Was there the PS2 version? I can't remember if there was.
It was Xbox exclusive, I think.
The second one was on.
Yeah. That came on every console. Chaos Bleeds.
Except Dreamcast.
Apart from Dreamcast.
Yeah, well, there you go. Maybe 2021 is the year that we find an unreleased beta version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the Dreamcast. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
If they can find like the weird Austin Powers racing game, they can find Buffy.
Yes, we need to put the call out there. I mean, we've done it before. Actually, we need to set Tom on the case, really, don't we? Tom is very good at investigating, so we should probably get him on the case. All right, so I think that's everything. That's what we want to see in 2021. Just more grown-up things. What about the 30th anniversary? What are we looking for 30 years of Dreamcast? Fast forward. No disc rot. Or a way to stop it.
I believe if games increase in value as they currently increase in, I believe in 2030 I will have an island.
True.
From the proceeds of the Dreamcast sales. In which case I will actually be starting the Republic of Dreamcast.
Excellent.
None of you invited. It's just and possibly Tom. I'll bring Tom along. That sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? Really, but yeah. There you go. So 2030, I'm going to me and Tom.
Now this is where we debate whether or not the price bubble is going to burst and all these games will be worthless.
That's true. But
thank you, Lewis. That's my retirement fund that I can't get otherwise because I'm a generation of people who can't have pensions.
Oh, we're going back towards the darkness.
Look, you said I wasn't invited. I had to burst the bubble.
I'll have a pick. None of you are gonna have a great time in World War III. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that it's just gonna be. Look, if you make it through, and the pending zombie apocalypse that comes after it, then I will have a video chat with you on the island. And that is, pretty much all I can say. I mean, I might have Ross there as well, just to scare people away. Just sort of maybe some people who make Dreamcast games chained to trees, sort of making games on the island.
Mike, your island is sounding like the apocalypse right now. You're like scary guy who ties people to trees and makes them make games. Not great.
Well, I do that now anyway. But
okay.
Come the apocalypse. Yeah. Well, ultimately, I've got a stash of Saturn shooters. I believe come the apocalypse, they will actually be worth a small mountain each.
Okay. Well, we will. I think when we finish this episode, we're going to have to go back to the Dreamcast chat and vote Mike out since he's not bringing us with him to the Dreamcast island.
You want to try democracy? You can, but let's see how that's worked for the last 4 years.
Okay, so coming back into the light, thank you so much for listening to us chat all about Dreamcast at 21 and what we want to see in 2021. And you can obviously find all of our previous podcasts, including the Dreamcast mini one and all the ones where Mike's predicted things that have come true, hopefully not World War III, on the DreamPod on all good podcasting apps. And of course, you can find all the articles that everybody's written about the Dreamcast over on the dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk. Also, before we go, I thought I'd give a cheeky mention to, you mentioned at the start, Mike, about the 12 games that have come out this year. Of course, you are at the moment kind of making some alterations to your infamous maybe A to Z of Dreamcast games.
Yes. So inspired by your own fine work and your own fine books, I decided I would do a revamp of my A to Z. All new Dreamcast games included. I think actually there was 12 games coming out. I think I've included already 18 games in there.
Wow.
And yeah, it's completely redone it, and there will be some physical copies made as well. It's not very professional. I am quite amateurish. However, it's another little bit of the Dreamcast puzzle put in place.
But yeah, it's a great guide. It's free at the moment. The current version is free on dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk, of course, and it's the best guide for anybody looking to see all the it's all the Dreamcast games, right? The reason you're updating it is because new ones have come out since, but at the time that was every single Dreamcast game ever released, right?
Yeah. So it covers every single Dreamcast game, every independent game, which has got a physical retail release. It basically is, if anyone remembers those sort of 20 years or so ago, the sort of music discography guides, or sort of history of the Olympics and sort of quite encyclopedic type things.
Yeah,
that's the sort of where I've gone for it. Reviewed every game as well. So another several dozen games in there. Some changes to some of the listings, because it lists every single version of every single game as well, because some new versions have come to light, and some things I didn't include last time. Some corrections, and a few other little bits in there as well. It will still be free as well, so the downloadable version will still be free. It'll be free forever. There is going to be a physical copy just for people who want it. There'll be no profit made at all. I don't intend to do that. Just literally just to get something in. I was going to say get something physically in my hands. And I think at that point that shows I maybe said too much.
Potentially, yeah. So this is next year that we're looking at that being released. There you go. We're going to start 2021 off with a bang, regardless of what actually happens that year. So that's great.
And who knows? It might be with an actual bang as well if World War III comes.
You said we've got at least 2 or 3 years, Mike. Make your mind up. It's fine. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I'm going to go build a bunker. In the meantime, if you want to, you can find me at Oddmint84 on Twitter. Lewis, where can we find you?
It is at LewisJFC on Twitter, spelled LEWIS. Follow me on there if you want to.
Lovely. Mike, where can people come to you for Nostradamus predictions?
Yeah, so a little island in the Bahamas, small island. You'll notice it by the burning Nintendos. And whatever other sort of weird fanboyish Dreamcast things. I'm also on Twitter at space_turnip. Also on a Twitter account called Dreamcast Pics. That's Dreamcast Pics, which is just basically crap.
I enjoy it. I think it's nice to see all the different games you've got. It's like a visual representation of your collection, really, on Twitter, which is pretty cool.
It's basically my attempt to justify to my wife that I can buy these games for a reason other than just sitting on a shelf.
Yeah, well, you're doing well so far, I'd say. Yeah. Pretty good. All right, well, thank you very much again. And if you want to find the Dreamcast Junkyard on Twitter, it's at the DC Junkyard. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode. Until next time, take care and stay safe.
Please stop this disc now.
Yep.
So what's next then? What does 2022 hold for the Dreamcast, I guess?
21.
What does 2021 hold for the Dreamcast? So
I think we should skip 2021 and go straight to 2022, actually. In 2022... No, I'm sorry. I do apologise.
We need to put this at the end.